Hey everyone, we got a video here talking through nutrition for concurrent training. We've got Tom, our hybrid athlete stroke coach, to talk through some nutrition tips to help you get the most out of your training if you're doing this concurrent training of strength and endurance work. So Tom, just hit us with some nutrition advice.
Brilliant. So in terms of common faults, common things that I see is we're going to look at this in the primary way is that we commonly see people who are doing strength training, maybe CrossFit, and then they're bolting on, endurance training to their sessions, whether that's say they're working towards a 5K, a 10K, a marathon, they're doing some cycling, they're doing a triathlon, etc. But they're starting to bolt on extra sessions to their typical week. The number one thing that I see is they obviously fail to account for that additional energy expenditure. They're doing more training, or they're doing more volume, they're on their feet, they're cycling, etc., which therefore might place them further maybe towards a deficit or maybe into a deficit. So this is obviously going to have an impact on their performance across the week. It might impact their strength performance. It might actually just impact their endurance performance as well, and it's going to impact their recovery. And you kind of end up in a bit of a spiral. I've seen it where people just end up very fatigued, not making progress, etc. Something else to obviously look at is different styles of training. In terms of endurance training, will have different energy outputs. So running is a higher kind of energy demand versus say something like swimming, or maybe something like cycling. But cycling, you might cycle for 2 hours, but you might only run for half an hour. Yeah. So you've got a lot more variables versus just being in the gym for say 60 to 90 minutes, for example. Another thing maybe to think about is, and this often goes for, I think, for any diet, is people sometimes get a little bit caught up on everything kind of day to day, trying to hit every gram, every macro, every target day by day, and sometimes not just taking a little step back and looking at things as more maybe across a week in terms of a weekly picture. You often look at your weekly training program, but yet often we focus on nutrition like very, very individually. So actually looking at maybe how we could adjust things across the week to match up and align with your training as well. Something else that I just commonly see is people taking calculations as absolute gospel. Now, this could be calculations in terms of like a calorie calculator. This could be calculations in terms of how many calories you're potentially burning according to your smartwatch. I am a geek, so I've worn a lot of them, and I know that the difference in some of the calorie and energy expenditures on them is massive. Hundreds and hundreds of different calories different, but people kind of get, again, really hung up on the data and try and do things to an exact. I always just think it's a starting point, and then like anything, you can get feedback on how you're performing, how your recovery is, etc., and then you can begin to make adjustments from there.
Yeah, like I think that's a really key point. Like it's a starting point, and the hardest thing is to be aware of how you're recovering, how you're performing. Are you making progress? And this is where tracking progress is a useful tool. But you mentioned there about measuring calorie output, and often people would be like to us is, well, especially with endurance work, the calorie output can be quite high. So if we're maybe doing a 2, 3, 4, 5 hour run, or training session, cycling, swimming, strength training across the day, then the caloric output might be very, very high. And now it's quite hard to eat that back, and I know we spoke about weekly targets. So should people be eating it back? Should be backloading it on that day? Like, what's the kind of setup that we can advise people with?
Yeah. I think potentially there's a couple of different options that you can look at doing. I'm going to talk about what I've used over the last year or so. Yeah. And this has helped me to put on mass while getting faster and running half marathons and now training for an ultra marathon. I've managed to put on mass. So I think it is, again, just about setting things up to begin with and looking at almost ignoring the endurance side of things first. And, calculating, right, if I'm in the gym and I'm doing X number of strength training sessions a week, how much do I need to be, either at maintenance or to be trying to get stronger and build muscle? I would always naturally, if you're going to use our spreadsheet calculator, is just maybe pick one above your target. So if your target is lean gains, again, it's just a baseline, it's just a starting point, but I might go into that muscle gain gradual. If your muscle gain gradual, it might be worth going one above. And then you would select the number of training days per week that you get. That will give you, what I call like a baseline target across 7 days a week.
Yep.
Option number one is, for example, you might have, for example, here, like an interval session, a low intensity session, and a longer run that, like I say, burn extra calories in those sessions versus your weight training. So we're going to err on the side of caution and say that if we calculate 90% of the energy expenditure in that session, because you still got your BMR in there as well, and we're going to take a little bit of kind of grey in terms of what smartwatch you might be wearing, you're then going to get, like I say, 80% of the amount of calories burned in that session. What you could then do is just distribute that across the week. That could be a really easy way to do it. If you know you do similar sessions across the week. So for example, I could take this 2,200, divide it by 7, and then my body needs an extra 314 calories per day. Now, this is going to prevent me potentially from going into a deficit, which is going to obviously inhibit me in terms of looking to put on mass and get a little bit stronger.
Yeah. And often this is what people don't account for. Like you said, they add sessions on, they do extras. They maybe start to, as they get more efficient, as they go through a training program, the volume and intensity goes up, but they don't necessarily account for this all the time. And this is where people that hit plateaus or hit, persistent fatigue, and just can't seem to hit the numbers, hit the intensity, and that could be in strength sessions or endurance sessions. Like you say, this is I think a really nice, simple way to just talk about making it really simple of eating back or those calories. And it's not about eating back, because like you say, you don't want to get to the end of the day and then be like, oh, I've got 400 calories, or I've got 1,500 calories to eat at the end of that day.
Yeah.
If you're being proactive with it like this, then you can spread it across the day, and then potentially, like say, extra snack, extra additions to meal.
Yeah. Potentially there might be a problem with this, and that is that you've obviously calculated for what you think you're going to do in the week ahead. These sessions, for whatever reason, the interval session, you might bin it off halfway through, you're tired. The long run might be longer than the previous week, so your energy expenditure might be higher. You might do different types of disciplines if you're a triathlete or something like that. So sometimes it may be better to be a little bit more reactive on that day. So what it might be worth doing is taking the same calculation, so 90% of the total energy expenditure from the intervals or from the list session or from the long run, but on the days that those sessions are performed, we then add those calories to our daily target.
Okay.
So that may particularly support the recovery around, for example, like the intervals is a higher energy expenditure session. The long run session obviously is a big energy expenditure output, and to support recovery and potentially maybe even to support hunger on that day. So those days we're looking to eat back that 90%. On the days then that we don't do the extra, like say the extra kind of endurance work, we then follow that baseline target. So we've always got that same number, and then it's just on the days that we do them, we eat them back.
Yeah.
In terms of what to eat, if we've hit our baseline and we've hit our protein target, we don't necessarily need more protein, really.
Yeah.
What we can do is top the tank up by primarily eating these calories back from carbohydrates with some fat as well.
Yeah, I think that's very sensible. I think that's even just like I said there, like you don't want to eat that back on that day, because like you say, it can be an issue eating that much. But actually, I think it's looking like they're calculating 90% and doing it on those days. Potentially, like you say, this is the current method that you're using, and actually, I think it could be nice. Very achievable, apart from if we're doing a very long run or cycle or swim or whatever. Obviously, if you're on the bike, it's quite, you can snack on the bike and potentially kind of eat away at those extra 1,200, 1,000, whatever calories that you're going to be burning. But if you're not, or you don't really like to eat on a bike or run, or it's challenging to eat in a swimming pool, but you might then have a really chunk of your day where you don't necessarily eat, and then that makes it hard to then backload and eat that extra calories on top of what you're already eating. So I know you said eating back on that day, but is there a possibility that you could then, not to have the biggest pun in the world, but could you have like a hybrid setup where you maybe have on certain days when it's like 300-400 calories where you eat back on that day, but then on the day where you're doing the long run, you could then just let it kind of creep into the next day, which is maybe a rest day. So you would go like 1,000 calories on the Saturday and then the 500 extra on the Sunday, so that then you hit that Monday morning training, which is probably the most volume and the most intensity, and go from there. Would that be something that, have you done that? Is that something you could advise people to do?
I think it's a great option. I think one, like I say, it's maybe easier just to physically eat it without eating poor quality calories.
Yeah.
In terms of it. And also, come midnight, the body doesn't kind of reset. We are always recovering.
Yeah.
And particularly if we have done a high energy expenditure session, yes, we might eat on the bike or on the run, but like I say, we still might have 1,000 calories to have. I think it's going to be really nice to then help you into your rest day to, like I say, eat a little bit more, spread it across those 2 days, so that you're not going back into the gym feeling sluggish, feeling under recovered. And again, it's just a little bit more achievable in terms of extra snacks, adding bits to meals, rather than, if you're not a big eater and a big feeder, then that might suit you really well.
Yeah, sometimes exercise can suppress the appetite as well, can't it? And you actually don't. I've done that when I've done triathlons. I didn't want to eat, even though I just, done that. I was like, I can't really stomach anything. And obviously that if that happens on a regular basis, then that's going to impact your recovery. It's going to impact your progress. Really great point there about making. If you let it go into the next day, then you probably are going to make better choices with the calories that you eat. That's very good point to make there, because like I say, you could eat back 1,500 calories probably, one tub of Ben & Jerry's or half a tub of whatever it is, and then away you go. However, we know that what we do is not if it fits your macros. We want to focus on food quality, and like I say, just maybe even just saving a few of those calories for the next day on a rest day, which potentially, again, clients might be a little bit hungrier on. This is definitely common feedback that we see: hungry on a rest day. Or it's just a nicer thing because you have a little bit more time, a little bit more, to cook or to eat or to sit down and like I say, just make sure that they're in. But I think that's a great method, mate, and you're feeling good on it.
Feel fantastic. Like I say, recovery's been really good, which is the key thing when training in a hybrid way, is that you have to be able to recover to be able to deal with the multi-disciplines and the volume and looking after my joints and all those kind of things. And like I say, I've been able to put on about 8-9 kilos of weight while getting faster and running further and doing all things hybrid. So yeah, and like I said, it's relatively simple for me to get my head around. Like I say, I've got that baseline target 7 days a week, which I'm really dialed in on, and then on the days that I do them, I'll just make sure that I'm refueling the tank in the correct way.
Yeah, I think that's it. That's that simplicity, isn't it? It's a really clear method of what you got to do. And there's a tiny bit of wiggle room. It's not set, so it's not like, I missed it that day. That means I can't do it till next week or whatever. But like you said, set that baseline, calculate this. And again, use this as, always remember this is a starting point and it's not exact. So if you're 10% either side, don't beat yourself up. But then also be aware if you are starting to feel fatigued, still, feeling a bit beat up or whatever, then maybe adjustments. Or if you feel that you're putting on weight, if you're putting on too much, non kind of usable weight or whatever, then potentially, Tom said about picking the target. This is on our plans, picking the target above. Then you might just want to kind of stick at the target that you originally were starting on. So, just drop that overall baseline intake down, and then keep everything else the same. If you're feeling like that's an issue that you're experiencing. Tom, I think that's fantastic, mate. Really useful stuff, and it's really nice to see that you've implemented it, and adjusted things, what you used to do, and that you're now filling out that large pH top. We get you in the Excel next time, mate. So I think I need to scale down. A woman's small or something. So yeah, I might have to get on this. Tom, awesome work, mate. Really good. Really up to date. Really kind of unique approach, and I think it aligns with what we want to be doing and making things simple. So hopefully people can get the most out of their training and nutrition using these methods. So top man. Thanks very much, buddy. Anything else you want to wrap up on, or are we all good?
All good. Let's go.
Lovely stuff. Thanks, team. As always, any questions that you have, just please pop them in the comments and the questions. Email us. Find us on social media, and we can direct you in the right way.